Good afternoon, everybody. Lots going on, but looking at the CBC front page, you wouldn't know that. You have to scroll down a whole bunch until you find the United We Roll pipeline, which is a pretty big protest in Ottawa. So that's the focus of today's video, and we're going to hear from Maxime Bernier, and we're going to hear from Mr. Andrew Scheer as well. Both addressed the United We Roll protesters, not Yellow Vest protesters. And I'm making that distinction because this CBC News article is half information, half Yellow Vest hit piece, despite the fact that this is called the United We Roll pipeline or pro-pipeline rally, right? So I just find it interesting, the reality that the newspaper is still trying to push, despite the reality we can see with our eyes from the continuing protests in Paris of the Yellow Vests. They're up to Act 13. And there's been so much going on in Canada that it feels disingenuous of me to report on France, but it does inform this report, right? The Yellow Vests are not what the French government, I suppose, and the media that is supporting them want you to believe, and as well with the Canadian media. The Yellow Vests aren't what they're calling them. And yeah, they're going to be provocateurs. They're going to be people who use the Yellow Vest, just like in the People's Party. They're going to be people who claim allegiance with the People's Party, whose main goal is to defame it or to hurt it somehow by their affiliation with it, right? So that is going to happen, and it's going to happen less with the established parties, because the established parties, all of that deal making's been done. It's been, money's changed hands, and people are in action already selling out our government, right? So it is what it is. Okay, anyway, back to this big protest that is currently bringing Ottawa to a standstill. Actually, I think it just finished like half an hour ago. Okay, here it is. United We Roll pro-pipeline convoy reaches Ottawa for mass protests. After nearly 5 days of driving, a convoy of hundreds of pro-pipeline supporters has reached Ottawa for a mass protest against the Liberal government's energy and environmental policies. The United We Roll convoy has also become a lightning rod for anti-immigrant sentiments, forcing organizers to try to distance themselves from the so-called Yellow Vest movement. After starting the journey in Red Deer, Alberta on February 14th, the convoy arrived in Canada's capital just before 10 a.m. Tuesday. That's today. The convoy rally is expected to bring parts of downtown Ottawa to a halt over the next 2 days. Street closures are planned around Parliament Hill to make room for the semi-trailers, pickup trucks, cars, and buses. Lead organizer Glenn Carrott, owner of an oil field fire and safety company in Innisfil, Alberta, said the group wants the Liberal government to cut the carbon tax, Bill C-69, which would overhaul how Canada does environmental assessments of energy projects, and Bill C-48, which bans oil tankers from the northern coast of British Columbia. Supporters have also raised concern about Canada's signing on to a non-binding UN compact on global migration. I'll pause here. Interesting that they have to add in that it's non-binding. They may say that it's non-binding, but Canada agrees in assigning it to align our policies with it. It may be non-binding, but our judges cite non-binding things all the time. Have you heard of the Paris Agreement being cited in law recently? It has been, and usually I'd have a link, but I don't have time for that right now. But it has been all over the Western world. These non-binding statements that we sign for the UN become binding when our lawyers and our judiciary get a hold of it and say, well, the government said we're going to be aligning with that, so that's going to become law. So that's what we need to do, make it become law. It becomes its own layer of bureaucracy, right? And anyway, I just want to point that out, right? Non-binding does not necessarily mean non-binding. Back to the article. The 36-page document lays out a collaborative approach to dealing with growing global migration and sets out 23 objectives for treating migrants humanely and efficiently. And Canada is doing a masterclass in how to do this the most expensively and stupidly as possible, and to try and export that to the world for some crazy reason. It doesn't make any sense, and it's stupid. Back to the article. Carrott said Canada's borders, quote, need to be controlled by Canada and its citizens, not the United Nations. He had originally referred to his group as the Yellow Vest Convoy, but renamed it United We Roll after it was linked to extremist elements. The Yellow Vest movement started in France late last year when protesters took to the streets against rising fuel prices. Yes, that's all it was about, the rising fuel prices. And they just won't stop, despite the fact that Macron, their president, has repealed the fuel price increases and is desperately trying to hold his government together. But don't mention that, CBC. Don't mention that. Okay, this part is the hit piece part. They talk about how terrible the yellow vests are. It says counter-protesters plan to meet the convoy near Parliament Hill on Tuesday. So far, there's no plan for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to meet the convoy. No, but the other two leaders who are actual leaders and their own people and didn't just have their principal secretary quit in disgrace amongst nothing to see here, no charges. I didn't do anything wrong, but I have to go defend myself against people calling me mean things. Right, Mr. Morneau? Anyway, Maxime Bernier's whole video here is quiet. I've turned on the closed captioning. I apologize. I'm going to try and use the magic YouTube things to enhance this volume, but I apologize if it's not loud enough. So sorry if you are listening and you have to turn me up and then turn me down or whatever. I apologize.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for doing that and for being here to protest, because you're not asking for a handout, you're not asking for any privileges, you're just asking for being sure that this country will be able to build pipelines. That's important, not only for you, that's important for all Canadians. And yes, you're right. We don't need a carbon tax. We don't need the bill C-69. We don't need the bill C-48. And under our leadership, with the People's Party of Canada, we will scrap C-49. We will scrap C-69. We will privatize the other pipeline. So we need to have a pipeline that would be built by the private sector for you and for our friends from all over the country. So it's easy to say that. It's very easy. Justin Trudeau told you that you'll have a pipeline. Andrew Scheer is saying the same thing. And I'm saying the same thing. Who's right? Who's going to deliver a pipeline? We need
a constitution!
Yes, we need to use the Constitution. So, I said the same thing in French in Quebec. I said the same thing in English in New Brunswick. I said the same thing in English in Alberta. And now I'm telling you that. Yes, we need to do some consultation. But if we don't have any agreement, we need to use our Constitution. We need to use the Section 9210 and declare a pipeline for the advantage of our country. And yes, if we don't have an agreement with the politician in Quebec or the politician in BC, we will use the Constitution and impose a pipeline. Because Canadians know that it's first of all safer to build a pipeline today. It is safer for the environment. It is safer for the population. And Quebecers remember what happened 7 years ago in Lac Mégantic. We need to transport our oil and gas by pipeline, and we need to use the Constitution if necessary. I'm asking you, ask that question to the other politicians who will come here, if they have the courage to use the Constitution if necessary to build a pipeline. Ask that question to Justin Trudeau. We know the answer. Ask that question to Andrew Scheer. He was not able to answer that in French in Quebec when they asked the question. And the journalist said to Andrew Scheer, do you think that you will use the Constitution to build a pipeline if Quebec, the politicians in Quebec are against that? He was not able to answer the question. You know, I'm answering that question. Our goal is to speak to our fellow Canadians and speaking about what is good for this country, for the unity of this country. We need pipeline, but not only that, we need to have a fair equalization formula. we need to be sure that it would be fair for everybody. If we want to unite our country, we need these two reform at the federal level, and I'm there. The People's Party of Canada is there to deliver that for you and for all Canadians.
Sorry, that was Bernier. And a couple of things, he kind of got derailed by the woman with the megaphone screaming about the Constitution. And he said, yeah, we need, and she was saying we need a Constitution, but he said, yeah, I'll use the Constitution. That's what I said in French. And we will declare a pipeline in the national best interests and have it happen. Basically, I will use the Constitution, and he stated specifically which aspect of the Constitution he would leverage to push the pipeline through. So he's saying unequivocally there will be pipeline construction under a People's Party administration, which is good to hear. Mr. Scheer addresses the crowd as well. I felt like Mr. Bernier spoke for about a minute longer than he needed to. He could have been a bit more concise, but the bells, I think, also not set him off, but like kind of knocked him off kilter. He was good at controlling the crowd, but it was just a little bit rambly, just a little bit, in my opinion. But his message came through. He repeated himself a couple of times. We'll use the Constitution. We'll get a pipeline built. It's important for Canada. It's important for not only Alberta. It's important for all of Canada. And he said also fair equalization payments, which is something that Alberta has been asking for quite a long time. So interesting. I thought a good and interesting speech. Here's Mr. Scheer, and we'll watch this, and then I'll tell you what I thought. And I don't think Mr. Bernier was as quiet as I thought he was, so here we go. Andrew Scheer is just as loud as I think normal people, or it normally is, so here we go.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shannon. I want to thank all my colleagues from the Conservative Party for being here with me, our members of Parliament who have been fighting against this terrible Liberal government that is attacking our energy sector. But most importantly, I want to thank all of you in the United We Roll convoy who have come all the way from Western Canada, Ottawa, to let your voices be heard. It is time that Canada has a Prime Minister that is proud of our energy sector. That doesn't go to Europe to tell his famous friends that he's trying to phase out our oil and gas, but fights for it, fights for markets for you, and fights to get you back to work. I am sick and tired of watching people, chaining themselves to trees and laying down in front of bulldozers, trying to block Canadian energy from reaching markets, but yet day after day, we see tanker after tanker of foreign oil coming into our markets. It's time for that to stop. Conservatives support our energy sector. We want to get pipelines built again. A lot of people ask me, say, well, what's your plan as a government to get pipelines built again? I say, there was a time when government didn't have to build pipelines because the private sector did it with investors' money. Government doesn't need to build pipelines. Government needs to get out of the way to let each and every one of you do it. So come October, we have the power. You have the power to get rid of the biggest single impediment keeping our energy from getting to market. And that is Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government. And we can do it by voting him out.
We can do it sooner.
And getting a Conservative government that will scrap Bill C-69, the No More Pipeline Bill.
Stop the travesty, let's get it rolling.
That will scrap the carbon tax. On va construire des oléoducs pour déplacer le pétrole de la chemin de fer. We're going to build pipelines to get oil and gas off of the railways. And we will work to achieve a west to east pipeline, getting Western Canadian oil and gas to Eastern Canadian markets so that we don't have to import oil from countries like Saudi Arabia and Algeria and the United States. So that's my message to you. Ça, c'est mon message à tous qui sont aujourd'hui ici. We've got your back. We're fighting for you. We are standing with you. We believe in you. We celebrate what you have done to build this country, benefiting every single region. There isn't a single community in Canada that can't look at some of the benefits that they've gotten from the oil and gas sector. And we will support you. We will help you get back to work. Thanks for your commitment to Canada. Thanks for everything you do each and every day. Thanks very much.
So I wanted to point out, he said, we will work to build a west to east pipeline so that we don't have to buy Saudi oil. We can sell Canadian oil east. But he didn't say, I'll use the Constitution to make sure we build that pipeline. He didn't say that, and he has not said that. So, I've heard that I've got a couple of friends who watch things as closely as I do, and we have very spirited debates, so which is good. And it's fine that we disagree, but he said that Mr. Poilievre came up either before or after Mr. Scheer and said that they would use the Constitution to make sure a pipeline is built into Quebec to supply Canadian oil to eastern provinces east of Quebec that are currently relying on United States and Saudi oil. So I found it interesting, the terminology used by Mr. Scheer there, saying we'll work to get that built, that east-west or that west-to-east pipeline. It just sounds a little not strong enough. But if there's a Pierre Poilievre clip out there that he is speaking about using the Constitution to push a pipeline through a province that is dragging their feet, be it BC or Quebec, then I mean that's different. But if Mr. Scheer's middling around language is all we've got to go on, then it's still middling around, and it's still no guarantee of a pipeline. The only person, well, and let me rephrase, the CPC government's record on pipelines has been absolutely, the best this century, let's say. Okay, so they have proven that they can get business to build pipelines. Absolutely. And Mr. Scheer said clearly he would repeal Bill C-69. I have no doubt in my mind that Mr. Scheer can build a pipeline through BC and supply oil to Asia or whatever other markets he wants to diversify from away from the United States. However, my point is not that. Okay? My point is specifically the pipeline through Quebec, and Bernier's stance on it is clear. Scheer's is not as clear. Okay, I hope that clears up what my meaning is, because I don't want it to get lost. So it may be controversial, but if it's controversial, I'm going to get flack for it. I want to get flack for the specific thing that I'm talking about. So thank you for watching. Check out the People's Party of Canada.ca. You might want Mr. Bernier to be your next Prime Minister. And, well, there's still a lot more to come. These protests this is day one. I haven't heard any reports of counter-protesters yet, but I'm keeping an eye out, and I definitely owe you guys a Maxime Bernier tweet roundup. Really, there's been a lot happening in the last couple of days. It's incredible. It's incredible. I've had a Maxime Bernier tweet roundup lined up for probably a day and a half. When I was going through my videos, I realized it was 3 days ago, and a lot's happened. Lots to look at, lots of news. So this election is going to be fun. I'm already having fun. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon.